Hello, everybody. So, despite the fact that there was a new newsletter just last month, there was a surprise this morning from Toby Fox. The Halloween 2023 newsletter has appeared in all of our inboxes, and I'm gonna go through it right now because there are some huge new pieces of information that significantly change when Deltarune is going to release, which is very exciting because I've spent the past year speculating when it's going to release. That's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen my other video. You probably haven't. Nobody's seen that video. But yeah, I just woke up to this an hour ago, and now I'm going to read through it and give as detailed of an analysis as I can, having just woken up an hour ago. Also, I fixed my mic quality, by the way. I hope you like it. So, the newsletter starts off with an intro from Toby about the lore behind us getting a newsletter on Halloween. It's very important that you know the lore before you read the newsletter, so we also get new drawings from Temmie of the Toby dog and Sans and Papyrus, and we also get new drawings from Temmie of Sans and Papyrus. Never seen these two before in costumes, it's really cool. And here is the meat of the news. Well, actually there are two pieces of meat. There's like a ribeye steak and then a very nice other kind of meat. I don't know. This is one of them and they both look so good. I'm so excited to dig into these two delicious looking pieces of meat, lightly seasoned with Alright, I'm gonna stop this analogy. Chapter 3 is pretty much content complete. Do you see this? This is amazing. This is huge news. Chapter 3 is content complete as of October. I can tell that this was written in October because it's Toby Fox is talking about his birthday, which is in October. Normally the newsletters and updates and everything that Toby writes are written a month before he posts them. It seems like this was written in still October. So, Chapter 3 is pretty much content complete as of right now, this very moment. Exactly when you're watching it. Essentially, no more changes to dialogue or gameplay. That is great news because now they can stop focusing on Chapter 3 and focus entirely on Chapter 4, which they haven't been able to do before. I think they've always, throughout the course of Deltarune Chapter 3, 4, 5's development history, they've been either focusing only on Chapter 3 or focusing on 3 and 4 at the same time. A bit of spoilers here for the rest of the newsletter. Chapter 5 is a lot less far along than 3 and 4, which we will get to because that leads into some very exciting news. Toby was able to show the finished Chapter 3 to one of his friends on his birthday, and he said it was really good to see them laugh at all the stupid jokes they've created. He does say this statement, it took a long time to get here, but now it feels like everything will be downhill. I think this means downhill as in you run up a hill and oh, it's so tiring and exhausting, and then you get to the top of the hill and you see the world before you, and then you run downhill and it's a lot easier than running uphill. I think it's probably downhill as in the process will be speeding up and getting faster and spiraling out of control in terms of how great and awesome things are. I hope that's what that means. Really clear analogies. The playtester he mentioned did say that the bullets seem kind of hard for Chapter 3, which, judging by just generally the news we've gotten about Chapter 3 so far, it seems kind of like it's not as much focus on the story as compared to previous chapters and probably future chapters. Yeah, so in the summer newsletter, Toby said that Chapter 3 is shaping up to be a pretty strange one because of the unusual gameplay elements, and it's not too heavy on the story. Chapter 4 will be a much more standard chapter. So Chapter 3 is probably going to be I'd say a bit of a break from the story heavy Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, which they had to be story heavy because it was Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Some unusual gameplay elements, a lot of frivolous Deltarune fun. So as a result of that, it seems that Chapter 3 might be a bit of a jump in difficulty, which I personally don't mind. I'm sure a lot of people don't mind, but it seems like because Chapter 3 is less focused on the story, they could ramp up the difficulty a bit, I guess. Toby does say releasing a game takes many more steps than finishing the gameplay and graphics. I'll get to that in a little bit because it affects when Deltarune is going to release, which we have a much clearer idea of. We'll get to that. And everybody is really excited to work on the next part, which is good because judging by a few things in this newsletter, Chapter 4 has a pretty good amount of work done on it already. Toby also says that when they started Chapter 3, it took a lot of trial and error to figure out how it would work, which was probably last year sometime, early last year, or towards the summer that they were trying to do the trial and error, and maybe a little after the summer too. But with Chapter 4, they feel much more confident about how to progress. They have a better plan laid out, it seems. So that is great news for when Deltarune is coming out. I highlighted this picture accidentally. Now, going back to the very weird steak analogy that I concocted earlier, this is the other delicious looking piece of meat on the table. We've just finished the first piece of meat, which is Chapter 3 is finished, and it seems like fun, and it's going great. This is the second piece of meat, and we weren't expecting to get this piece of meat at all. We didn't order this piece of meat. The waiter came out. Actually, we weren't expecting this newsletter either. So we ordered a glass of water, and the waiter brought out 2 giant pieces of steak. I don't know about you, but free steak is great. God, what am I talking about? What do I mean here? Anyway, so this is the other big piece of news from this newsletter. Since Chapter 3 is nearing completion, Toby wants to talk about how Deltarune will release, and the short answer is, instead of releasing Chapters 3, 4, and 5 together like he had originally planned when Chapter 2 was released, Toby is now planning to release Chapters 3 and 4 just when they're finished, and Chapter 5 will come at a later date. I think we knew about this earlier, but he says that they're going to package together like Chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, put that up for actual money. You have to pay money for Deltarune now. I know, it's the end of the world. But that will be as soon as Chapter 4 is finished, and Chapter 3 is already finished. As soon as Chapter 4 is finished, they're going to bundle up Chapters 1 through 4, put them all together, and release that, which is great news because Chapter 4 will probably take a lot less time to finish than Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 together. Just like quick math there. And he does say that the finish line of Chapter 5 is still pretty far off, which makes sense because there really hasn't been anything about Chapter 5 that's like been revealed yet in any of the updates. Like even going back to the 2022 update where we got all those screenshots about Chapter 4 and then the Spampton sweepstakes with stuff about Chapter 3, there was really nothing about Chapter 5, which I thought at the time that was just because, oh, they were working on Chapter 5 and they didn't want to spoil anything because it's like a lore significant, story significant chapter, but it also seems that Chapter 5 is just not very far along in development. I think it was very smart of them to focus on Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. And like Toby said, he is the person who wants Deltarune to come out probably the most out of anyone in the world, which I believe. So I'm glad that this change was made. This is a delicious piece of steak, in my opinion. I will get into more detailed analysis once we finish the newsletter, because there's a little bit more. He also says that Chapter 4 already has a substantial amount of cutscenes and enemy work done. This is what I was talking about with the 2022 update. He mentioned that they had mostly gotten work done on Chapter 3 and 4 from whenever they had started working on Deltarune in like early 2022 or late 2021 to when he wrote the 2022 update in August. From that time, they had done some amount of work on Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, and then they did a little more work on Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, and then from at least February 2023, they have been focusing mostly on Chapter 3, and then now in October 2023, Chapter 3 is done. However much work they have on Chapter 4, they'll probably have to focus on it for like 8 months more until it's finished. We'll get to that in a little bit. There are multiple things in this newsletter that could push that release date forwards or backwards. So also, this is also great news. Toby hired a new producer whose entire job will be to speed up the overall game development. In terms of game development, like game producers' jobs are literally, to manage the process of the team who they're working with and like make sure everything is going smoothly. And they also generally have a lot of experience with creating games and finishing games. So this is another instance of Toby saying in the newsletter, oh, hey, we've hired more people. Our team is continuously growing. He said that like 5 times now. So it's nice to see that the team is continuously expanding, and Toby feels really good about the way the game is progressing. And lastly, he says he's going to pause on more detailed updates for now, and instead letting us know if development is getting close to completion or if something funny happens. So this might mean that we aren't going to get any more regular newsletters, because we have the first regular newsletter was from December 2022, and we've now made a full circle. We had December, March, June, and now September, and now this, the Halloween one. So there hasn't been a repeat of any of the newsletter months yet, so there might not be a repeat, and Toby might just send out semi-regular newsletters whenever something interesting happens, I guess. Maybe if they put a bunch of trees in an area and it melts a console, that would be funny. But yeah, this line makes me think that there might not be any more newsletters, which would be fine. This is just something small, but I noticed at the end of the Undertale's 8th anniversary newsletter, there was a line here from Toby that says, "See everybody next year for the next Undertale anniversary. Not necessarily see you in the next newsletter," which this was the anniversary update, but it was also the fall newsletter. So that might have been suggesting that there wouldn't be any more newsletters, but who knows. And then lastly, there's an interview with some of the Deltarune development team, which you can go through on your own. I really enjoyed reading through this. There's a bunch of interesting spites from development. I really like seeing this stuff. Like they used to do a sick little squat here. I don't know what that is, but that's awesome. And Susie used to have purple on her. That would be cool. Really small tidbit, the Spamton Press F1 for help was the work of Taxidermy, who I owe immense amounts of gratitude to for this small feature. This is probably one of my favorite things in any video game, that you can press F1 for help during the fight with Spamton, and he will actually help you. I love Spamton. Also, there's this. That's cool. Just tiny things that I can get from this. They're still using Game Maker because that's a Game Maker error message. I think we knew that though. Anyway, that's the end. There's a little bit of lore for Toby is a sheet now. That's about it. Sans pumpkin. So, what does this all mean? As I said before, Chapter 3 is content complete, which is great news. It took them from February of this year until October, which is 8 months of focusing entirely on Chapter 3, because they said in the spring newsletter that they were focusing mainly on Chapter 3. So, whatever work they had gotten done before February, plus focusing on Chapter 3 for 8 months, was enough to completely finish Chapter 3. And Toby did say that Chapter 3 was a lot more complicated and more trial and error-y to figure out than Chapter 4. So it's likely that Chapter 4 will take a little less time than Chapter 3 did. We don't know for certain, but I think my guess right now is that there's more work on Chapter 4 done right now before it's been focused on, entirely, than there was work done on Chapter 3 before it was focused on entirely. So basically, before February 2023, Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 had a certain amount of work done from when they were focusing on both of them together, and then they focused on Chapter 3 mainly, but I think they still got some work on Chapter 4 done. So I think it could be a little less than 8 months before Chapter 4 is completely done. In case you're wondering, 8 months from today, October 2023, would be June 2024. That's my prediction, not prediction, for when Deltarune Chapters 1 through 4 are gonna officially release. There are a few factors that could push it forwards or backwards. Because Chapter 4 is a more standard chapter, it could take less time than that to complete. Also because Toby hired a new producer and he feels optimistic about the next steps. Development seems to be continually speeding up, which is great news. That's another reason that Chapter 4 could take less time than Chapter 3 did, pushing that June earlier to maybe a spring 2023, which would be insane, by the way. And then on the other side of things, of course, there is the fact that once Chapter 4 is content complete, the game isn't finished. They can't release it as soon as Chapter 4 is finished. They have to figure out how to package Chapter 1 through 4 together, take all of them and put them together and make sure that there aren't any very weird errors that come from putting all the chapters together, which could take longer than expected, who knows. There's also the fact that they have to get all this working on consoles and everything, which they seem to be testing with, because there was that note in the other newsletter about them testing a console and putting too many trees on it and it made it run slow, which is very valuable development information that we have been granted by by Toby. But there's the possibility that something with consoles could come up and complicate the release a little bit. It's generally just a fact that releasing a game on consoles and PC takes longer than it does to just release it on PC, so that might come into account. Essentially, there are a lot of things with production that don't just end as soon as Chapter 4 is complete. So even though progress on Chapter 4 will be going smoother, or could be going smoother from now on, there's always the possibility that there are extra things after Chapter 4 is done that might push development back a little bit. My final prediction, and you can quote me on this, don't quote me on this. My final prediction for Deltarune Chapters 1 through 4, Chapter 3 and 4, Chapters 1 through 4, the whole shebang, will come out around June 2024. It could be earlier, it could be later, I don't know by how much, but we will hear about it when the game is about to come out. Toby will send out a newsletter or something. He might do a trailer this time. There might be a trailer for Deltarune. We haven't gotten one of those in, I think, ever, actually. So keep an eye out for that, because Deltarune is now going to be like available for money, which it has never been. So there might be a trailer, which that could also take a little more time to develop. Deltarune is coming sooner than you think, which is great news. This was amazing to wake up to this morning, so I hope you all are as excited for Deltarune as I am. Thank you for watching. Just some other stuff. I put out a video earlier today, actually like late last night. That's something else I've been working on in the same style as my old Deltarune video that was predicting the release date. Not this one is much better, but it's like a narrated, fully edited. I spent a lot of time editing it, and I'm really proud of it. Check it out if you like horror games or if you hate horror games. It would be a great video for you. Also, I'm going to be streaming soon, like this week, if maybe next week. Soon. So keep an eye out for like a community post about that, because I'm really excited to get started with that again. Look forward to that. And that's about it. Thank you for watching my video. Thank you to everybody who watched my old Deltarune release date video. That meant a lot to me, even though I was very blatantly wrong. Actually, I wasn't. I mean, if they just released Chapter 3, it would be out today. Well, no, that's not true. Thank you to everybody who watched that. It means a lot. It means a lot that, like, something that I put so much time and effort into could be positively received by a bunch of people. So, thank you. Thank you for subscribe. I really make number go up and give me $20 a month from YouTube.